Hi, my name is Oyun Orka, a VTuber who tries to draw, and recently I hit over 10,000 subscribers. Thank you so much for the support. To celebrate, I'm doing a video a bit different from usual. For today, I'll be redrawing your characters in my style. But since I also love drawing backgrounds, I'll also be planning 3 different scenes with different types of backgrounds for these as well, so there won't be any white void backgrounds here. Reviewing the submissions, there were so many beautiful and interesting character designs, I had a really hard time choosing. I'd love to do more videos like these in the future as I hit subscriber milestones, so if you'd like to support my channel and see more of these in the future, please consider subscribing. If I reach more goals in the future, I'll continue to pick from this tag, so if you're interested in submitting your characters, please tag them with Oyun Redraw on X, formerly known as Twitter, to be considered. So without further ado, let's move on to our first drawing. I decided to choose to draw Strawberry's character, Shard. By the way, the red stuff is definitely ketchup. Anyways, what caught my eye about this character was the predominantly desaturated colors with the really saturated red and yellow. I also love nautical themed designs, so I immediately had an idea to draw this character in a sort of cloudy scene by the ocean. That way the reds could really pop a bit. After pulling the reference into Clip Studio Paint, I go ahead and start sketching out thumbnails. While I usually sketch a couple thumbnails if I'm not feeling sure about the concept, I decided to go with the first sketch here since I like their general concept. The sketch is pretty rough, but it's enough for me to work off of since I have a pretty clear vision in my head of what I want the final to look like. Usually I would do another sketch in between here, but I decided to jump straight into line art and hope that in the coloring phase I'll be able to hide some of the mistakes I make here. Right now in my head, I'm envisioning this character kind of leaning against a railing and onlooking some sort of cloudy sea. But for now, I just go ahead and line the character. As I'm lining, while I don't resketch all of the parts, I do resketch a couple parts that I feel like I need more help in, particularly the arms and the hands. After I finish the line art, I go ahead and do the flat colors for the character. This step is pretty simple since essentially it's just color picking from the reference and drawing pretty much what I see. Flat coloring is quite easy for me since I can basically just turn off my brain at this stage and just color pick from the reference. After I finish the flat colors, it's time to move into the background. Typically for backgrounds, I have a vision in mind in my head of what kind of direction I want to go for, in this case a cloudy kind of oceanfront scene, and I find photo references in line with that. I use a variety of brushes to kind of get the effect that I'm going for, and blend in some clouds and also an ocean. Because I'm going for a kind of cloudy and foggy scene, I don't draw in a really solid horizon line for the ocean and just use an airbrush to kind of blend that into the sky, just to give it that foggy effect. Next, I draw in some waves with a brush, and also add in the handrails. To keep it simple, I'm just using a dark color for now, and I'll also add in some ropes using a rope brush. For an extra detail, I'll also add in a life preserver ring on the railing as well, just to give it that look of maybe being on a boat instead of on a dock. While I'm choosing colors for this, I try to pick desaturated colors to give it that really moody effect of a dark and cloudy sky. Right before I start shading the character, I also make a new layer, set that to lighten, and then just pick a light gray color and then brush that along the bottom of the canvas as well as slightly behind the character. This is just to add a little bit of highlights and give that effect of rain or fog. I also want to desaturate the colors on the character slightly, so in order to do that, I'll go ahead and pick a gray color from the sky, clip it above the character layer, and then set that to color and lower the opacity. Next, while initially I was imagining this piece to be backlit from the right side, I decide that I want more visible blocks of shading and lighting, so I'd have the lighting coming from the back left side of the character. At first, the shading is a little bit more subtle, but I decide that I want to push it even further and make a new layer, set that to multiply, and start blocking in a main shadow shape. This way, it's clear that the light is coming from the left side of the canvas. After adding in some highlights and also doing correctional layers through filters, including gradient maps and tone curves, I was initially planning on finishing it here, but decided at the last minute that I wanted to add in some rain. I felt like since there were dark, cloudy skies in the drawing, a rainy scene might fit this better than just a cloudy, foggy scene. And finally, after adding some filters, we finished the illustration. I really think that the last minute addition of the rain really adds to the piece and pulls the piece together, so I'm pretty happy with how it came out. Next, I decided to draw Momochi Art's character, which is her persona. I really like the somewhat sleepier dazed look the eyes gives off, and the high contrast between the dark hair and dress, as well as the light pink pastels on the clothing, was really nice. I began sketching, and I knew for the final piece I wanted something really light and brightly lit because I feel like it would fit the character well, but I wasn't sure exactly what direction I wanted to go in. At first, I just roughly sketched in Momo's persona and her pet ragdoll cat, but decided that maybe the petting scene isn't as strong as I wanted. I duplicate the initial sketch on the right and then move to the left and then start sketching in a cherry blossom scene. I end up liking this thumbnail sketch better than the other one, so I decide to enlarge it and choose this one to finish. This time, because I'm a bit unsure of the angling and posing, I go ahead and sketch it another time in addition to the base thumbnail, and end up changing the arm pose as well. After finishing the liner, I go ahead and add in the flat colors. Next, for the background, I wasn't sure if I wanted the angle to be more upwards or downwards. Since right now the character is angled kind of downwards and looking up at the viewer, I wasn't sure how I would get in some of the sky colors that I wanted in the illustration. Ultimately, I decided instead of a blue sky background that it didn't make sense for the perspective, and instead to just sort of dappled light ground, with cherry blossoms casting some shadows on the ground. Next, I go ahead and use a cherry blossom brush, which doesn't have color by default, and then add some color manually. I also have another cherry blossom brush that has color already and use it to add some shadow and texture. While I'm drawing this, I want there to be some sort of depth from the cherry blossom leaves, so I choose to have really large cherry blossom petals visible in the bottom left-hand corner, and medium-sized petals visible in the top right-hand corner. I make sure to blur objects based on how close they are to the camera, making sure that the bottom left-hand corner with cherry blossoms are blurred the most, add a slight blur to the middle ground cherry blossoms, and make sure that the character is mostly in focus. After finishing most of the background and foreground, I move into shading the character. I'm doing most of the character shading on one multiply layer and generally choosing warmer tone colors since the character itself is pretty warm toned. I use slightly more contrasted warm tones for the skin and slightly less contrasted tones for the clothing. I also add in some shadow from the cherry blossoms itself and decide to lighten the whole piece a little bit more as well. I really want this piece to have a really light and airy look, so using some overlay layers and choosing a pink color, I decided to airbrush in some areas to bring out some more light. Finally, I added some blur effects and filters, and we're done with the second drawing as well. I also added some lens flare effects at the last minute which weren't recorded, just to brighten up the piece a little bit. Overall, it was so much fun to draw a bright and floral piece. And moving on to our final drawing for today, I'll be drawing Mint 7's character, Alistar. While I usually draw more anime-esque characters, I wanted to draw this one because I love predominantly monochrome and winter-themed designs. I may be a bit biased though, given my own design. Designs that are more monochrome allow me to play around more with the surrounding colors as well as the values of the piece, and when I read the character description of how he's a hacker, I wanted to do an interior scene where he's in front of a computer in a dark room with strong and harsh lighting. For some reason, I really struggled with thumbnailing this piece. I had a couple of ideas, but didn't know how to execute it properly, but finally landed on a sketch I was happy with. Because the thumbnail sketch is so rough, I resketched it as well, and then add in a perspective grid just to sketch out the background. After I have the base sketch done, I move into the line art. While the base sketch is still pretty rough, because it's more clean than some of the other ones I did, I have an easier time lining this one. And also, just to save some time, because the pants and legs aren't the focus of the drawing and won't be lit up as much, I decided to use the outline feature on Studio Paint just to block in the colors immediately. Next, after I finish that, I go ahead and add in the flat colors for the character. Next, after I finish the base color, I move into shading. Because the lighting will be really harsh, I want to make sure I have a solid base for the shading first before I get into the background. While this is a bit out of order, I want to make sure that I really capture the puffiness of the parka jacket well. I also want to make sure that I remember to add the lighting from the screen onto the eyes and hair, so I also draw that in now. Next, since I'm done with the character base, I start drawing in the background. Because the character is a computer hacker, I wanted to draw a hacking scene and have some computers and just electronics visible in the background, so I find some photos of PCs and use that as reference. I adjust the perspective grid on the background a little bit to make sure everything looks good, and draw in the background. Next, I darkened the entire piece a little bit, and added my correctional and lighting layers. For correctional lighting, I'm essentially just using a multiply layer overlaid over the entire background, and then using other airbrush and other effects mostly on the character itself. For the character, the base shading is done on a linear burn layer, the lighting shading is done on a main multiply layer, and on that same multiply layer, I also go ahead and use a bright blue just to give that effect of the screen shining onto the character. I also have some add glow layers and screen layers to brighten up the scene as well. Here, I don't shy away with using a lot of correctional layers because I really want a look of harsh and artificial lighting from the computer screen. As a final touch, I use an overlay layer to bring in some more of the blue colors, and also add in the rest of my effects including blur, RGB shift, and more. And with that, we finished our final illustration. Also, I didn't end up recording this, but I added some slight colorful highlights from the lights and just some sparks to add in a little bit more color to the piece, since the piece is so predominantly blue. Overall, I'm pretty happy with how it turned out. So with that, we were able to turn these 3 characters into 3 different scenes. It was so much fun to draw these characters, try to capture their personalities in my own style, and imagine the world that they live in. And that's it. Thank you for watching, and I hope seeing my process in drawing some of your guys' character was helpful. This is gonna be a bit sappy next, so please skip or click off this video if you don't want to hear this, but genuinely thank you so much for the support on my channel. I read every single comment and I'm so grateful to all of you for spending the time out of your days to see my art process. I don't consider myself a great artist by any means, but one of my life goals was to be able to help at least one person meaningfully with their art. Since I have over 12,000 subscribers now, which is an absolutely insane number to me, I hope I've helped at least one of you meaningfully with your art in some way or the other. I think art is such an important part of my life, and many people's as well, and I hope to be able to continue drawing and creating for a long time. I hope you are also able to continue to draw and create for a long time as well. I'll see you next time. Bye bye!